A lot of the conversation that happens around different philosophical debate, or all philosophical debate in the current age, uh, it has this quality where it seems like it's just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's a kind of a common, almost cliche phrase at this point, but I feel like it kind of captures the problem, which is that it's all downstream. All of the debate, all of the argument is downstream from a deeper problem, and the debate doesn't actually do anything to help the problem. We're all because it's downstream, it doesn't affect what's happening upstream, which is the real core of the issue. But the thing is, the the way of actually approaching the core of the issue is not going to be with philosophy or theory or debate, because the core of the issue in our current age is that our whole cultural fabric worldwide and the equivalent of cultural fabric in our own psyches. So the ways that we organize our minds, those are both changing. So the modern era, the orientation of the soul has run out. It's run its course. The paradigm by which we have organized our own souls and minds is now, it's too old-fashioned. It just can't accommodate the knowledge, the technology, the interconnectedness, and just, even if it weren't for all those different things, it's too old. It's been 3,000 years since these basic orientations of the human soul were laid down, and now they've just run their course. So, of course, they've also we have these crazy social, technological changes as well, and that it just means that we need to. The reason that the social fabric is breaking down is because that paradigm, this very foundational, totally basic perceptual paradigm, is now changing. And debating it kind of misses the point, because you can never grasp that paradigm with words. And I think that's where this sort of wisdom of the we see that, with the logical positivist movement, and that attempt to create a perfectly coherent language to get the perfect bird's eye view, or the view from nowhere, or the God's eye view, that's just a pipe dream. It can't be done. And the reason of that is that what was being attempted was, we wanted to have a perfectly crisp, flawless language with logic that could give us that bird's eye view. But the thing is that now what's being recognized is that you can never get that view from nowhere, because you're always within a context. So the context, like, a logical language you have to always make assumptions to start off with. That's basically the wisdom. Nothing can get started. You can't start from first principles. That's what Descartes wanted to do. He wanted to say, I want to call everything into doubt, and I will start with first principles. The thing is, you can't do that. The first principle at least can't be a reasonable principle. It can't be logic or philosophy or anything like that. First principle, the thing that gets you started and pushes you into the world, is always some irrational act of the soul. And when I say irrational, I don't mean to degrade it, but I just mean it is not rational. It's a living, organic, emotive thing. We have that. That's the way we immediately relate to the world. And the thing is that in our era, the way our attitude towards the world, our direct, perceptual, emotive, value-laden attitude towards the world is changing. So that in all of these debates, when it comes down to, you can debate about Marxism versus capitalism, or you can debate analytic philosophy versus postmodernism. and then we have this weird culture war stuff with the woke on the one side and then the conservatives on the other side. And the debates, there's still a belief in all of the debates that somehow you could get to the core of the issue through theory. But it always seems like it's missing the point. And the trajectory for myself, trying to understand, has been, at first, I thought there was some value to debating these cultural war issues. Like, we can debate communism versus capitalism. We can debate, the gender theory, the Marxist theory, or whatever. We can debate it, and we can, one side can win. But the thing is that all these different groups, these belief groups, there isn't really any point of contact between them. They just have different assumptions. And there is no common sense which can mediate the debate, because the two teams, they don't agree on what qualifies as a legitimate belief or a legitimate argument or perspective. Which means that there's no point where, if you are part of any group, say you're a pro-capitalist person, you can't really listen to the communist argument or the Marxist argument, because you just don't agree with them on what qualifies as a legitimate argument. They have a different standard for legitimacy. So they can make as many arguments as they like, and you'll just never hear them because you have a different value system. So then the debate kind of becomes pointless. So my trajectory of thought has kind of gone down that path where it just seems like, we can argue about these shallow issues, but there is no possible way of reconciling them, because the disagreement is so foundational. It's actually below the level of reason. It's the assumptions which go into reasoning that are different. So no amount of reasonable debate can ever get there, because you just have different perspectives. It's as if, you're trying to reconcile two mathematical systems with totally different assumptions. Every mathematical system has to have a certain set of basic rules, which are just given rules. A plus A equals 2A. That's a rule. A times A equals A squared. That's a rule. But you can have one system with those set of rules and then another system with a different set of rules. And there's just, at some point, there's no way of reconciling them, because those are the foundational rules. Those are the assumptions. Now, of course, the thing is as well that the assumptions that we have in the domain of debate and philosophy, they aren't explicit rules like with the mathematical system, because there you can, at the very least, with a disagreement in the domain of logic and maths, you can always bound the issue. You can say the exact reason why you can't make the systems, you can't reconcile the systems. You can draw a circle exactly around where the incompatibility is. Whereas, because the fundamental disagreements in our current age are disagreements of value and of perception and attitude, those can't be made explicit. So you can't even really draw much of a circle around the issue. And so that means that all the stuff, it's that rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. All the debate is sort of downstream from the point. But then you have to wonder what the actual point is. And I think one of the things that's difficult is that you can't really say what the point is. I have an image that seems to be accurate to me, which is that, you live in a village, say. You live in a village in a valley, and you want to get perspective on your village. You want to feel a bird's eye view. So you walk up the mountain, and then you can look down at the village from the high place, and you get that bird's eye perspective, so that you can see the layout of the village. You have a certain kind of understanding and perspective that you couldn't have when you were in the village. But I think that's not how debate around this issue is. I think what happens is that the mountains are very, very far away from the village, so that you can walk up the mountains and get the bird's eye perspective. But the mountains are so far away that you can barely see anything from the top. And I think that's basically the situation we're in now, where you want to use philosophy or theory or something to get perspective on the cultural, political, philosophical situation. But you have to scale so far, so distant. The abstractions are so distant from the reality that you have to strain your eyes to see what's actually going on. So you can't get that kind of perspective which you want, which is to hover right above it and to look down on it. I don't think that philosophy can provide that, or any kind of thinking can provide that perspective. The mountains are too far away. The abstractions are so distant from the concrete thing that's happening in reality that it's not to say that's not valuable, but it's not what we want, which is that just bird's eye view. That good, clear bird's eye view. And so, but the other thing as well is that we have to be sort of humble, because, I might say, we are rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. We're debating things which are downstream from a much more important perceptual, value-based problem. The thing is, though, it's not easy or even possible to go to the core. I mean, first of all, I can't tell you what the core is. I mean, even if I were a sage or something and I was able to directly perceive, I could hone my attention directly onto the foundational shift, paradigmatic shift of our souls and our culture. I wouldn't really be able to tell you about it, because you could always disagree with me. You could always dig into the assumptions that would be necessary for my descriptions to make any sense, even if I were a sage. And of course I'm not. So then we're in this kind of weird position where, I mean, what's the takeaway that I'm trying to produce here? What would I actually hope that anyone would take away and would consider? Well, I don't know. I think there's just a certain lack of attention. I don't know what the solution is going to be, but it does seem to me that paying attention to the actual thing that's going on is probably good. Because I think if we're sleepwalking, if people are rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic and thinking that they're going to stop it from sinking. And it just seems kind of cruel and sad for humanity to go out like a herd of sheep that's jumping off a cliff because the sheep in the front jumped off the cliff, Like the momentum is for the herd to jump off the cliff. And I think that would be too sad. It would be too tragic if things were to end that way. And so I think if we can at least, because when I say it, I'm already thrusting myself into the domain of language and discourse and reason. And of course, you can always disagree with my descriptions. You can always say, oh, well, why do you believe that? Why don't you believe this instead? What are the assumptions that are necessary for your claim to make sense? But I guess you just have to trust your own intuition, Maybe that's the thing. The valuing has to be not on the words themselves, but if you would listen and then observe the same perception in yourself. Because, I mean, at some point I'm just trying to express a perception, which is that the cultural fabric is coming apart, and then the psychological fabric is coming apart, and that people don't share common sense, but that you can't just debate that problem away, because the common sense is crystallized in the domain of irrational, non-rational, value-based psychological and cultural processes. It's not a debate. We don't create common sense by having accountants calculate what the most appropriate thing for common sense would be. It just happens on the deeper, well, not necessarily say deeper level, but more animal. Like, we're still animals. It happens on that basic level of being animals, where our values have to change, and they only change by direct contact with reality. We can't actually change them by designing them with a rationalistic mode. So I think the main thing here is just to say that my perception is that the social fabric and psychological fabric are coming undone, and that if you can attend to that and keep it in your mind and kind of act in a way that you think will pull the fabric back together, maybe that's good. Or the thing is, though, maybe it's not, though. This is the other issue, is that it might just be that history is happening and there's nothing that you can really do about it. I mean, an individual can attempt to pull that social fabric back together, but it might just be that it needs to be apart. It needs to fray like a... it's like an alchemical process. It has to dissolve and then coagulate, and then dissolve and then coagulate. And we're at the end of a coagulation, and it must now dissolve. And it might just be that attempting to coagulate too early is silly. That you could never gain. It could be that the era that we're in now is one of dissolution, and that's necessary, and that no effort to crystallize from an individual will have any effect, because the whole cultural soul of the world is trying to shed its skin. But here's the question that I get stuck on, which is that it could be that we're shedding our skin and that we have to be cautious not to shed too much. That's one way of seeing what's happening right now. We're shedding our skin necessarily. The old way is over, and we have to shed that skin, but we can always go too far, and we can get rid of all of the valuable things that we have. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We do have to change our cultural paradigm, but we can't just throw away everything that we have, because too much of it is valuable. That's one way of seeing it. Kind of an amoral way of seeing it. It's more of like a physiological description of culture and of psychology. The other way of seeing it is a moral one, where there's a sort of, when the system comes undone, the tendency to be destructive and evil that is also a part of human being comes out and tries to destroy. So that when you're at one of these leaping off points in history, you really do have to act right. Because people can either decide to act right and keep the momentum going, or you can pass through that bottleneck, but only if you have goodwill. But if you don't, then you'll destroy everything. That's another way of seeing it. And I just don't know what the solution there is. So, because it could be that history is simply happening, and that you have to just accept at some point that the whole world soul is changing, and that it will just go through the motions it must. In which case, I suppose the best thing to do as an individual is to just keep a clear head and try and have a good time. But it could also be that in these periods of change, there's a constant threat of the horrible, evil aspects of humanity coming out, and that we have to defend ourselves against those. So I don't really know what the solution is there, because both seem appealing, and you can make a convincing argument for either. On the one hand, the force of history, the influence of the individual is nothing in comparison to the force of history. But at the same time, you look at something like the Holocaust, you look at the Holodomor, and you think, it's just it's a little bit naive, it seems, to think of human history as a physiological process when you have those kinds of atrocities in your mind. The moral weight is pretty evident. So I don't know what the solution is there, but I do think that's the core. Well, no, that's as much as I can derive from the core. The core issue is something that I can't even say. I can't package the world soul, the paradigm of the human psyche into words. But one of the issues that I can extract from that problem is this issue between the power of history and the power of the individual doing good works.